Well, YouTubers, I've been quiet for a while, waiting to see what how things would develop. And as far as I can see, well, first and foremost, the coronavirus thing. I I'm not infected. Um, it doesn't affect me, my lifestyle too much, because I don't go out that much anyway. Um, mm, it seems to be having some kind of impact in some unhealthy and some healthy directions. A lot of the stuff people do going to nightclubs and bars and stuff is really not that good of an idea anyway, as all kinds of emotional and psychological stresses develop in connection with this sort of thing. They get blithered about afterwards. And anyway, the danger of the stuff is that you can be contagious long before you show any symptoms, unlike most diseases. So you can spread it around. And weaker immune systems, older people, and so on are more liable to get in serious trouble with it. But once you've had it, your immunity to it is brief, and after that you could be reinfected, or it is possible the thing's latent in you and comes blazing back. Either way, on this second infection, you could have your immune system go on overdrive and have a cytokine storm, which results in organ inflammation that can cause organ shutdown, in some cases even heart failure. There's videos of people just lying dead on the street that just collapsed in China. And anyway, of course, there's been all kinds of conflicting information handed our president. So, some will be complaining he didn't act soon enough, and others complaining he acted at all. Regarding Trump, there's this really strange attitude about him. They call him racist, and everything that comes out of his mouth is racist, said one guy, and a talking head. And by that, apparently, he means that if you criticize a person of color, then you must be racist. Trump has also criticized some obviously white people. And of course, what's her name? Pocahontas. When she finally got a DNA test done, she's probably more pure white than most people in this country. A joking rendition of her pedigree in the circular form, little spike sticking out, points to one spike saying, "This guy, maybe." In other words, she engaged in fraud and provable lies since then. And they scream about him lying and stuff. Well, all the other presidents for several rounds of presidents have been lying. Their immorality has been well hidden. His in the past is not so well hidden. And what he is doing is what a lot of people want and is needed. We do need that barrier wall. People who lived on this side of the border generations ago, for a long time, for generations, would help the people coming across the border, give them food and water as they went on their way. But nowadays, these same people say they can't safely do that. You got a criminal element coming over here in droves. The cartels have been engaging in some of their warfare fairly far, 200 miles into Arizona. So this is not a good thing. I think that the people who hate Trump, it's like they're in a trance. It's like they're those characters in that movie, The Body Snatchers, where they instinctively recognize, by some little details of bearing and so forth, normal behavior, something that is different from themselves, and reject that and flip out and start screaming and pointing at them. Someone else said that Trump had never taken any initiations. Gingrich said this is a positive thing, though he's got some issues. And before him, someone else said this is a negative thing about him. So it would seem that there is an overall enchantment, transmitted occult influence, state of mind, whatever it is, whether it's of the flesh or the devil or both, and peer group brainwashing, following along with whatever, go along to get along sort of thing, that is operating. And they talk about he's not presidential. It means he's not manipulable. He acts like a real leader. He is more honest and real in his style of behavior and presentation. And he's not at the beck and call of the elements that have positioned themselves de facto above all the segments of our government, which were created in segments precisely to prevent a seizure of power by any one section or by some uniformity or something. And these people, by either shared membership in organizations or by a weird agreed state of mind that includes corruption, have effectively overrun that to some extent. And I recall seeing this video of when Trump was talking about the improvements economically for the black people. There were black representatives there. I don't know if they were all representatives or some of them senators, but the point is they were there. Congressmen. I forget how many. It wasn't a large number. One of them clapped and looked happy. The rest of them looked glum. And you know why? Because they need their people to be in a mess so that they can keep their jobs, keep getting elected, claiming they're going to fight for you and this and that and the other and blame Whitey and whatever. And in the meantime, a black guy who was pointing out the bullshit factor on a lot of his own people that he grew up with around and and he just, went his own way and built himself up and maintained his health and employment, so on. He seems to have disappeared from YouTube. I would assume he's been kicked off. E.T. Williams, the doctor of common sense. He had a really funny thing on this character who was talking about how climate change is so bad that, as Williams said, we're all going to die. And he says this and that and the other, and therefore, we're all going to die. Well, if we're all going to die, it follows that you don't need all your bank account, your cars, your house and stuff. Just give me all your stuff since we're all going to die. And actually, it's even worse than that. When I checked up on this character, he had gone farther than that. He was saying that it was the process towards human extinction was, well, extermination, whatever it's really like, is non-reversible. And the solution to this is to upload ourselves into the internet and be, merged with machines and be immortal and that sort of transhumanist garbage. Well, if you've merged yourself with a machine so that you're still walking around, you're part machine, yeah, you're still there. And if you're got a situation, dystopian future, where you're part of the elite that can go around in fancy cars and hijack the poor off the street and take them apart for spare parts to prolong your life, yeah, you can prolong your life. But if you take your consciousness, as you call it, you upload your brain to a computer, and then you die, either in the process or just in the course of time. That's not you in the computer. You are going to be experiencing death and whatever comes after that. And that computer simulation is all it is. It's just a copy of the contents of your brain. It's not the original file. It's not the original program. It's just a copy. And whoever's talking with you and it's interacting with you is going to experience dealing with you as if you were there, because it's a very good simulation. But it won't be you. You won't be immortal. You won't be experiencing immortality in the flesh. You won't be experiencing immortality in the internet. You're going to be experiencing immortality in the after-death world the same as everyone else. And eventually you'll be resurrected and judged. And you'll have this physical but immortal and indestructible body. And what is usually referred to as salvation, yeah, there is a universal salvation from death, physical death, because Jesus will resurrect all, but he'll judge all. And what we usually talk about in terms of salvation has to do with where you spend the rest of eternity, under what conditions you continue to live forever in that physical but immortal and indestructible glorified body. And those conditions could be very bad, or they could be very good. At least three categories of damnation: being chewed constantly by worms, or in the outer darkness, or in fire, Jesus mentions. He also says that some will have it worse than others, some better than others, who are still under judgment. Sodom would have it better than I think the city was Tyre, because Sodom would have repented if given the signs and opportunities that Tyre was given, and Tyre did not repent. So, anyway, back to Trump. It would seem the hysteria regarding him is because he is two things: a more or less normal human being, in a general sense, whether he's, maybe got some ego problems or whatever. But he is not part of the enchantment, part of the trance, part of the psychic soup, the mind field, whatever. And secondly, he's known these people for decades. He's partied with them. He knows what goes on. He probably knows where all the bodies are buried, figuratively and probably some literally. And they're scared to death. And as for Q, I don't like his style, and I don't know what to make of it. But once in a while, there's something. A stop clock is right twice a day. Generally speaking, I don't follow it, though I do listen to some of those who try to make sense out of it. This disease thing, well, you take a look at the Georgia Guidestones. Now, this represents supposedly the ultimate in progressive, liberal, wonderfulness, humanitarian, humane, whatever, which is a way of getting people to, that whole style. Somebody pointed out that these elites can't go around lording it over the weak, obviously, and declaring themselves superior because they're not weak, though actually they are. But they're in a socially stronger and economically stronger and politically stronger position. So they pretend to care about the weak and then propose all kinds of measures that are really bad for the weak. So the Georgia Guidestones, which have been highlighted, is that you should keep population under 500 million. That's a huge die-off that's going to have happened to do it, whether it was done by extermination or merely by sterilization and nature taking its course, people dying of old age. But the second clause is interesting. You want to talk racism? It says that there should be, I'm not quoting exactly, but it says diversity, that the breeding, reproduction should be conducted with care and wisdom, with a view to genetic quality, that sort of thing, and diversity. Now, you don't have diversity if you have everybody freely interbreeding, all the various varieties of humans interbreeding, until you have a, down the road, several generations later, everybody's pretty similar looking. You're going to have prohibition on miscegenation in order to have and maintain diversity. So we're talking population reduction and racism. Now, what's interesting about these elites and these progressive people and the Bilderbergers and Davos and what have you, CFR and everything, is that most of these people are white. And for a long time there weren't any women among them, but finally there were. My guess is that, and you take Obama. I think basically he was he got to be president because they wanted to have the worst president in history be a black guy, which makes the blacks look bad. And if they succeeded with Hillary and with anybody else who's female, it would be somebody who would be one of the worst presidents in history also, and female. The ultimate goal of these people looks to me like they want to have racial separatism, white supremacy, and male supremacy. You're going to need those. Oh, yeah, and there's all this talk about the transgenderism. We now have, I don't know, 50-plus genders. It's total sexism. It's all based on the idea that there is such a thing for a human as an inherent male or female quality, varying degrees of which, and that it's possible to be a bit of romanticism and occultic bullshit in the wrong body. That's where you get your tranny operations. But the additional gender thing is like, and they talk androgyny, again, it's which is an occultic thing. It's like presupposing there's this male and female principles and then they can be merged, instead of forget that nonsense. It's been observed all kinds of behavior and personalities and qualities, both in practice and in ascription, throughout the generations, throughout the decades, throughout all the centuries, and different cultures are often very different. Whatever that culture values most, however, is likely to be hogged for man. In one culture, it might be that artistry and mathematics and so forth is important, so men get to be considered to be inherently inclined to that. In others, it might be warlikeness, so they're inherently inclined to that. In others, it might be businesslikeness, so they're supposedly inherently inclined to that. And in places like the latter two, the women are assigned the artistic role. Of course, all this would have to do with, again, this is... it's all it's pure sexism. The whole transgenderism notion, a multigender notion, is sexism. Instead of throwing away the notion of masculine and feminine characteristics and let just people be themselves. And yeah, you're male if you got a penis, you're female if you got a vagina, and if you got some physical abnormality where you're in between, it's not sure what you are, that's a whole other ball of wax. There's nothing to do with your so-called gender is distinct from your sex. Now, there are characteristics, personality traits, and so on, like honesty, courage, both social, mental, and physical, don't go along to get along, stand up to pain and threat, and so on, and goals, and things like that, which are often ascribed usually to men. Women are perfectly capable of having these also if they work on them, but if they got the idea that they've got to be these pretty little toys, and even if they take the modern feminism, third wave or fourth wave it's being called, isn't anything like feminism really. It's just, it started, I think, the first threads of it were in what some call difference feminism, where you would keep your femininity and use your feminine wiles and whatever to get ahead, and but still have these careers and position and so on. But you still cultivate difference, even if what constituted that difference or manifestly corruption compatible, cowardice, manipulation, vanity. There are several things that are sometimes classified as masculine. They're just baptized sin. Several things classified as feminine. They're just baptized sin. In The Fascinating Woman or Fascinating Womanhood, I forgot which it was, some Mormon female said that a man should never be allowed or encouraged to develop the attitude that he doesn't need to be validated and flattered, that he'd be immune to flattery, because then he can't be manipulated. But this is right against what Jesus warns. that we should be doing is not being interested in glory that comes from other humans. Because then if we're interested in that, we're not going to get the glory that comes only from God.